I'm going to offer some reflections on Verne's life and Verne as a father. And then when I'm done, Chris will invite others to, if they like, come up and offer some reflections or words or memories. So that's totally up to you. So just know that you can do that if you like. And, as you may know, Patty's controlling the music there from her phone. So if I go a little bit long and she starts it up and plays me off, we'll be fine for that. So a little bit about Verne for those of you who may not know all about him. So he was born on December 8th, 1931, to Etta and Anthony Tony Caproni. Etta was from a farm community in Minnesota and came to Chicago. And Tony was a postman for over 40 years in Harvey, Illinois, where Verne grew up. He was the youngest of 4 children. Bob was his oldest brother, and then June and Laurel were his older sisters. And then he was a good bit younger than them and was the baby of the family. Undoubtedly, he was often spoiled, perhaps even more than me, although that's difficult to imagine. But I think he was well taken care of, well cared for. He grew up in Harvey, and he was a graduate of Thornton High School. He was also a proud veteran, and as we like to say, he served in Germany during the war. But fortunately for him, it was the Korean War. So he was out of harm's way and was driving a colonel around, I think, for most of that time in Germany, in Heidelberg and in other places in Germany. After the Army, after his service in the Army, of which he was very proud, as I said, he enrolled in University of Illinois, first in Chicago on the GI Bill, and then he went down to Champaign and graduated and became an accountant and joined the firm of what was then known as Wilkes-Besterfield in Harvey and worked there for over 30 years. So that was the only firm, if I'm not mistaken, that he worked at. And he retired when he was 60 and had a very, very good many years of life after that. So, that's a little bit about Verne. He first met my mom in 1961, is that right? My mom said that she and a friend of hers were at a fireman's dance at what used to be Washington Park Racetrack in Homewood. And then Verne came with some friends late to that dance and met my mom. And due to some alleged flooding and saying his car wouldn't work, which may have been a ploy to get a lift from my mom to a local favorite place they used to go to, Buzz's. He caught a lift with her. They went out that evening, later that evening. But I don't think he made a very good first impression. My mom said that she thought he was maybe a little bit obnoxious, a little bit too wild that evening, perhaps. But he did talk her into taking his phone number and giving my dad her phone number. She was working in Springfield at the time, and so wasn't in Chicago every weekend. But when she was back, he gave her a call. And he introduced himself on the phone as Verne. And this was very surprising to my mom. She thought he was goofing around and having a little fun at her expense because, as you know, her name is Love Verne. And when they met, he went by a nickname, Schweppes. Either, I'm not sure because of the club soda or the tonic water that he mixed with his favorite beverage. But he was known as Schweppes when they first met to her. And then when he called and introduced himself as Verne, perhaps he almost hung up on him. But thankfully, you didn't, and you went out on another date, but still not completely impressed. And it was only, I think, on the third time you were supposed to go out when he stood you up that you realized that you had some feelings for him and that he wasn't just another guy calling. And that was the start of what was to become a very, very beautiful romance and marriage. They were engaged for Christmas in 1962. They were married on October 11th, 1963. And they had 53 years together, and that is just amazing and really an inspiration to me and to so many people I know. So just a wonderful story. After well, I'm not sure if it was before or after you were engaged, when you finally came home, or Dad brought you home to meet his parents, you were very surprised. As I mentioned, Verne's dad, Tony, was a postman, and the first words out of your mouth were, "Oh my gosh, you're my mailman." And you're bald, because you always saw him with his hat on. And like Dad, like me, he was bald at an early age. So that's just one story that I'll always remember that you told about him. They were married in 1963. I was born a couple years later in 1965. And my dad was very, very special to me. He may have been an accountant, but for me he was always truly a teacher in so many ways. He always seemed to make time for me. Whether it was playing catch in the front yard, and I'd ask him that often, and I rarely remember him saying, "No, I don't have time." It'd be after work. I'm sure he was tired. He was enjoying a drink, I'm sure, after work, and either before or after dinner, I would often ask him, "Let's go outside and play catch," and he seemingly always would say that, yes, yes. He taught me to play golf. I was 9 or 10 years old, and we grew up in Dalton. There are a lot of golf courses nearby, and he taught me to play at a very young age. And I don't think he ever regretted that. After about 2 years, he never, ever beat me again. Came close a few times, but he taught me well. He taught me to appreciate jazz, much to Patty's dismay. He taught me to love sports, not only to play sports, but to be a big fan. He didn't always teach me to follow the local Chicago teams, much to my son's dismay, and they're unable to understand. I'm not a Bulls fan, never been a big Bears fan, but I did love the Cubs as he did, and was very, very happy to see, of course, him finally winning last year, and I'm really, really happy that he was able to see that as well. It's been a long time, and I know he was hoping for that very much. So him watching the games with my mom throughout the year and in the playoffs, I know is very, very special to both of them. Memories that my mom will always have, I know. And he taught me about not just sports, but politics as well. I rarely agreed with him, but he taught me to listen, even though he didn't always listen. And he taught me to appreciate and try to see different perspectives than my own, and for that I'm really, really grateful. He was not perfect in all his teachings, and he could be impatient and irritable at times, especially when he wasn't feeling well, as my mom could probably attest. My mom took care of him all those 53 years, but especially night and day in the last couple of years of his life, and in the last months, it was pretty much 24/7, and that was a great, great sacrifice that you made, and I'm so thankful, so thankful. He also was not perfect in that sometimes he thought he knew more than he did. Sometimes he said the wrong thing to me or to others. But there is no question, absolutely no question, that he loved my mom and me, that he loved all his family, that he loved Patty and Patrick and Joe, Dad and John, and all of his family and friends. He loved you very, very much. He took care of us and was there for us all through his life. In the gospel that John read today, Jesus says to Martha, "Your brother will rise." And I firmly believe that the same is true for my dad. I don't know the extent to which he believed in God, but I am certain that by the way that my dad cared for us and by the way that he was there for us, God believed in him.
I remember a couple of years ago, me and Grandpa were talking about the Cubs and some writers for the Tribune, and he asked me who some of my favorite writers were for the Tribune, and so I said Paul Williams. He was always a good writer, and Grandpa shook his head, and he laughed, and then he said, Paul Williams, he's a piece of crap. And I always found that Grandpa was very honest, and sometimes brutally honest. Having a conversation with him was always entertaining and always